All right, so we're starting our lecture today on firewalls. Let me just go ahead and share my screen here. Oh. So we're talking firewalls today. You have made some rules for firewalls. We have interacted with a couple. We've seen firewalls stop some of our traffic in the PWK course, but we're going to drill down and really take a closer look at them and how they work and where you can place them and the different kinds of firewalls. So here's our outline of today. Again, we are in the, all the time in blue phase. We're going to be referencing that NIST cybersecurity framework. And we're now moving from that first phase of identify, going over to protect. Okay. How we protect things? Well, the number one way we can protect things is by preventing reconnaissance, right? Think back. What was the first thing we did when we're attacking things? We gain information. Well, if we want to stop everybody, what's the first thing we're going to do? We're going to stop them from getting information on us, right? So we're going to learn how we can prevent reconnaissance. And then we'll talk specifically about firewalls and where they are, where they fit, how we protect them, how they serve to protect us. Okay. So give me 1 second here. First question is, how do we protect all of our systems, all of our people, and all of our data, right? We're going to ask ourselves how we protect or how we stop against passive and active reconnaissance. We're going to ask ourselves how we configure the logging systems so that if someone does engage in active reconnaissance against us, or does engage in some kind of attack against us, we're able to see it. Because if it's not in the logs, we do not see it. We're going to talk about some tools and techniques, some specific, but more in general, because again, I am not going to be able to teach you and prepare you for the specifics you'll have in your job, right? There's all kinds of different firewalls, right? Checkpoint, Palo Alto, public ones. I'm not sure what you're going to see, but I know how they all work, and I'm going to show you the techniques so that you can leverage them across different vendors. And then we'll talk about where we should be prioritizing our effort, right? Can't focus on everything. It's always going to be trade-offs. So the first thing we got to know, again, right, because the first thing we did in red team, the first thing we did when we're attacking is reconnaissance. So the first thing we're going to do in our defending in our protect phase is preventing reconnaissance, right? It's all about limiting and reducing that attack surface, right? What service or protocol did we encounter in PWK, that may have been turned off and prevent our reconnaissance?
Blocking ping attempts.
Exactly, right? Totally block your reconnaissance right there. There's no need for most machines to respond to ping, right? That's a technical thing that people need, but maybe every machine inside your network shouldn't respond to pings from outside your network. Maybe machines in your network shouldn't respond to pings from anybody, really. They should be using underlying protocols like ARP if it needs to, right? So the idea here, and it's like like any kind of fighter, you pull everything in, everything that you need to defend. You keep close and you limit. You're reducing your attack surface as best you can, and blocking ping is a pretty common way of doing this. Okay. Other ways you can prevent reconnaissance are these tools called IDS, IPS. I'm going to use these terms interchangeably. These are advanced tools that will block or change traffic in some way, or they will detect attacks of a whole bunch of different kinds. We're going to learn how to configure one or two of these. And again, I'm going to use the term IDS, IPS interchangeably because they function a lot of the same ways. The ones that we're going to look at a little bit today are Snort, and another one is called Zeek. You'll often see it called Bro. It used to be called Bro, and they're rebranding it as Zeek. So if you see Bro, it's the same thing as Zeek. But again, these are advanced tools that can block, that can change traffic, that'll detect things. Okay. You can harden DNS servers. How do we harden a DNS server? Everybody should have one answer now, at least.
Prevent zone transfers.
Mm-hmm. Right now, we all have an answer for this question. If you ever get asked in an interview, how would you harden a DNS server? Well, first thing I would do is prevent zone transfers. Why? Right? Because that's information that not everybody should have. Right? You can't allow zone transfers to anybody. So you have to make sure that you configure your DNS servers so that they're not allowing zone transfers to just anybody. They should only be allowing it to the secondary DNS server or tertiary DNS server, right? So you have it as a backup. Who is privacy services? Right? If you recall way back when, we would use WHOIS to do some kind of open source intelligence. I think there were a couple of CyberLab questions where we would use it. You could find out who has registered domain names. All of this stuff is out there, and it's changing. So for example, GDPR, the European privacy laws have changed rules with this public info, and WHOIS is not allowed to put as much of it out there anymore. But also you can register domains. A lot of companies do this through third parties, so it doesn't actually have your information. For example, I've registered my domain through Google. So if you look at the WHOIS, you'll see that Google owns it. It doesn't have my actual personal information on there. Other things that you would do for preventing recon is social media policies. Some of you probably have worked in companies that you had some kind of social media policy where you were either not allowed to post things or accounts needed to be set to private. I know, for example, Veer, when he was working at Google, he was not allowed to take group pictures with any kind of like Google badges or anything like that. Anytime like they would have events and they would have like their badges on, they had to like, all right, everybody, put your badge behind you so they're not on there, right? To prevent social engineering and to prevent people that would literally go and find people with Google or Amazon badges, pictures of them online, and print them out and use them to get into places. Essentially, real world spoofing. This is actual real and out there, and these are policies to prevent recon that you guys should be familiar with in any of these tech places. Cool. All right, so let's get to actual firewalls now. So the term firewall comes from these physical barriers that would literally stop fires. Right? So literally right here, if we're looking at this building, you see there's a wall between these two residences, and this is literally a firewall, right? Again, you have this power plant system, and again, you have a giant wall around it, and it is literally a firewall, right? It's to prevent things from getting from one side to the other. Here, another firewall, we have the sun. You have this, China, right? The Great Wall of China. I would say this is the probably best analog to a firewall. You've probably also heard of the Great Firewall of China. That is because China is well known to have essentially a giant firewall around all of the traffic that goes in and out of the country. They're well known for blocking or limiting data that goes inside or outside of the country. So let's talk a little bit about what these things actually are and how they actually function. Okay. Keep in mind, they really are just something that stops things from going in or coming out. Okay. So if we're defining a firewall, we have this simplest definition. It's either hardware or software that's going to filter network traffic. Right? That is all that it does. It is one filter. And there's generally going to be two things that they're going to do. They will either allow traffic to come through or they will block traffic to come through. That's right. Firewalls are your bouncers. Okay. And how are they going to do this? They do this through packet filtering. Okay. So how does packet filtering work? Well, there's a concept called the 5-tuple. Maybe you have heard it before, but if not, right, you're familiar with at least all of the parts of a 5-tuple. Is anyone able to give me the parts of a 5-tuple? And if you don't know them, you actually do know them. You just don't know them by name, maybe. That's okay. I'll give you a hint. I'll give you one of them. Oh, who's got?
The IP address, the source port, the destination IP address, the destination port, and the transport protocol.
Oh yeah, right? Everything I need to have a full conversation, to have the full conversation, right? Source port, destination port, source IP, destination IP, and protocol, right? I need to know all of those things, and that is how I'm going to decide who's in and who's out, right? That is how the packet filtering firewall works, right? So for example, like SSH uses port 22 on server end. So if I wanted to block something on SSH, right, I would have the destination port of 22, right, and block something like that. So firewalls compare one packet at a time, and they follow the rules in like a filter down order. So again, like they're literally the bouncers at the front of your network, and they're sitting there and they got a list, and at each packet that comes by, they're just looking down at the clipboard, and you're in or you're out. All right, that is literally what the packet filtering firewall is going to be doing for you. Okay. So what do we have more advanced than packet filtering? We got stateful inspection. Okay, this is one step above the next advance in firewall technology here, right? And so stateful inspection is going to look a little bit further into the network. They're not only going to look at the 5 tuple anymore. They're going to construct the conversation that's happening between packets. So they'll try and understand the TLS three-way handshake. They'll try and understand the flow of traffic. They'll use the TCP flags in addition to the 5 tuple. Okay, we're getting more information here that we'll pay attention to before it decides if it's going to allow or block. Okay, a little bit more advanced. Up again, to more advanced firewall, we have application-specific firewalls. So types like web application firewalls, WAF. Right? They're going to be specific to an application. They're going to know more stuff about that application protocol. So for example, a WAF firewall is probably not only going to pay attention to the 5 tuple, not only going to pay attention to previous packets that have been happening, but also it'll pay attention to what's going on inside the data that's being sent. It'll pay attention to, hey, maybe it knows a little bit about HTML. It knows a little bit about SQL injection. It knows a little bit about CSS and JavaScript, so that it can pay attention and look for specific things, maybe like cross-site scripting attacks or SQL injection, right? A little bit more advanced, looking deeper into the data, but again, still considered a firewall. And finally, top of the line, we have the catch-all term for the most advanced firewalls here. Right? Everything that's more advanced than web application is going to be called next generation firewalls. So what's more advanced than application? This is implementing things that can still filter traffic, do all of the stuff as before, but is going to implement or consider more layers of the OSI model. So, maybe there's some added machine learning on this next generation firewall that'll pay attention to certain things. Okay. But essentially, it's just the catch-all term for more advanced than application-specific firewalls. Cool. So that's the rankings of firewalls. Let's map them onto the OSI model. Right? Our
Matt,
model.
would the first one that you talked about, would that be considered a stateless one? The
Yes.
first.
Yes. So packet filtering will be stateless. Then you have stateful, application specific, and next gen. And so if we look at our OSI layers here, and we got our beautiful OSI model. Remember this? We use this to have a strong understanding of how systems communicate with each other, right? Data has to flow from application down to physical and from physical back to application. So at the lowest level, the physical layer, right, your electron level, you're actually on the metal. We don't have firewalls here. There's just not really any information to make judgments based on, the physical data there. So firewalls need to at least operate at the data link layer. You might have something there that take a look at MAC addresses or something like that. Packet filtering, though, will exist between the network and transport layers, right? Why? Because we need that 5 tuple here, right? We need the source port, destination port, IP addresses, and protocol. So you'll see stateful inspection in between the network and transport layers. Application firewalls, obviously, they'll be up at the application layer. The next generation firewalls will be pretty much everywhere, paying attention to all of the data that's across every layer of this OSI model. Stateful packet inspection might understand some information at the session layer, Right? Remember, I said it'll pay attention to some of those flags, pay attention to the handshake as it's going through, instead of just paying attention to the 5 tuple. Okay. So this is where they exist in the OSI model. Where do we actually place firewalls? Well, let's take a look. Where do you guys think we could place firewalls? I just ask you guys, where do I place firewalls?
Where the network devices are between the internet and like internal devices.
Okay, so at boundaries between networks. Okay, where else?
Would you want it on your server?
Yeah, I'd probably want it on particular servers for sure.
Outside the network
You mean outside the network?
or incoming traffic?
So I think that's like what Winnie said, like at the network barriers. Here we go. Place them on your host, right? Your work machine, a firewall on there. You can place it between the applications in your network. Just like Winnie said, you put it at your network segment boundaries, right? Between one LAN and maybe the DMZ, and between the internet and your DMZ. You put one on your home router, for sure you got one there, right? That's between a LAN and a WAN, right? What I'm trying to get you to understand is it's like Frank's Red Hot. You can put a firewall on anything and it will be better. I mean, not better, but you can put them on anything. So here I have, I think this is from a Cisco. Cisco showing you where you can put some firewalls. And, you know, as you can see here, you put them pretty much anywhere, right? You put them in the home router, you put them at the edge of the internet between the corporate WANs, put them in between the data centers, right? And each of your, brain fart on the word. But essentially in between everything, you can place them. And at every layer of the OSI model, you can place an appropriate firewall, right? Everywhere there's data flow, you put some bouncers. It's up to you to decide where. So let's talk about host-based firewalls, right? So what host-based firewalls are there? Right? There's one that's definitely gotten in our way a little bit. We got the Windows host-based firewall, right? Windows Defender. If you're running Windows 10, you got that. You got Windows group policies. These are fantastic. I've definitely heard from a bunch of red teams that when they end up with a good Windows Defender and Windows group policy, very hard to defeat. We also got Mac firewalls. These are under the security preferences. If you take a look, you can choose what kind of firewall you want to use, as well as preferences. I know Veer uses Lulu. I don't think I'm using Lulu. But it's an open source firewall that you can use on your host on Mac. Has a whole bunch of extra options, especially for connections from your Mac to the outside world. I know the Mac security preferences by default is pretty strong for machines traffic coming in, but not so much on traffic leaving the Mac. So you'd add another firewall there if you want. And then we have Linux. You have what we've already used before, and we'll use a little bit again today, IP tables, right? And the UFW, which stands for I think it's uncomplicated firewall, which we'll play with today. It uses IP tables under the hood, but it's a little bit easier to actually manage. So IP tables will give you more granularity as far as controlling your rules. UFW though is just easier to manage. It's just pretty easy to use. Okay. So in summary, what does a firewall? What does it do? Well, they filter and block. Those are your two, filter or allow. Essentially, are the two main things that firewalls are going to be doing. And they also analyze the network traffic and decide if it should go through or be blocked. We talked about the different types of firewalls, right? Packet filtering. Their lowest level of firewalls, again, what you want to pay attention to is the 5 tuple. We have stateful inspection. So you have your 5 tuple, as well as headers. We're going to be paying attention to. You have application firewalls, which is all of the above, in addition to understanding a bit of the application that's running through it. So for example, web application firewall knows a bit more about the HTTP protocol. Then you have next generation firewalls, which are the most advanced firewalls and the catch-all term for everything more advanced. We're generally going to be using some packet filtering firewalls. I think we have a WAF. I'm not sure. Okay, so stop share there and talk about what we're going to be working on today.